Abe Lastfogel. He was then the president of William Morris. Abe's passed on now.
When Miss Ellie first arrived in Mayberry, she seemed destined to become an important part of the Andy Griffith Show. As the warm-hearted pharmacist who quickly formed a connection with Andy Taylor, many viewers believed she was being introduced as a long-term addition and perhaps even Andy's future love interest. But after appearing in just a handful of episodes, she suddenly vanished without explanation, leaving fans to wonder what had happened. So why did Miss Ellie disappear so abruptly? And what really forced her to leave the show? Join us as we uncover the 3 reasons behind her unexpected exit and why fans are still talking about it decades later. The hidden story behind the Andy Griffith Show. Before Miss Ellie disappeared. Long before audiences began wondering why Miss Ellie disappeared from Mayberry, the Andy Griffith Show had already become one of television's biggest success stories. Every week, viewers returned to the quiet little town where Sheriff Andy Taylor kept the peace with patience, common sense, and just the right amount of humor. It felt like the kind of place where everyone belonged, where familiar faces stayed for years, and where change rarely came without warning. But as fans would eventually discover, that wasn't always true. Sometimes, a character who seemed destined for a much bigger future could simply disappear, leaving behind questions that would linger for decades. The story of Mayberry actually began before the Andy Griffith Show officially premiered. Andy Taylor first appeared in an episode of The Danny Thomas Show in early 1960, introducing viewers to the easygoing sheriff whose small-town wisdom immediately struck a chord. Just months later, on October 3, 1960, the Andy Griffith Show made its official debut, and it didn't take long for audiences to fall in love with its simple charm. Week after week, viewers watched Andy raise his young son, Opie, while handling everything from neighborhood disputes to Barney Fife's endless mishaps. The show quickly became one of the highest-rated programs on television, spending every one of its 8 seasons among America's top 10 shows. It won multiple Emmy Awards, launched successful spin-offs like Gomer Pyle, USMC, and remained popular long after its original run ended through decades of reruns. For Andy Griffith himself, the show's success came at exactly the right time. Before becoming America's favorite sheriff, he had built a reputation as a gifted comedian and stage performer. His Broadway work even earned him a Tony nomination, and his performances in films like A Face in the Crowd and No Time for Sergeants showed he had serious acting range. But by the end of the 1950s, Griffith believed his career had begun to stall. Years later, he admitted that he feared he had run out of opportunities. While starring in the struggling Broadway musical Destined, ticket sales had become so poor that theaters were offering 2 tickets for the price of 1 just to fill seats. Rather than continue watching his career slow down, Griffith decided to take a chance on television. That decision changed everything. Producer Sheldon Leonard saw the potential in Griffith's down-to-earth personality, and together they developed the pilot that eventually became The Andy Griffith Show. What seemed like a risky career move turned into one of the greatest television success stories of its era. Although Mayberry looked like the perfect southern town, very little of it actually existed in North Carolina. Most of the series was filmed on studio lots in California, carefully designed to create the warm, welcoming atmosphere audiences came to love. Even one of the show's most famous images wasn't what many viewers imagined. The opening credits, showing Andy and Opie walking toward their favorite fishing spot, gave the impression of a peaceful country escape hidden somewhere in rural America. In reality, those scenes were filmed at Franklin Canyon Park, a public park located right in the middle of Los Angeles. The same location has appeared in countless other television shows and movies over the years, but for generations of fans, it will always be remembered as the fishing hole that welcomed them into Mayberry every week. As comforting as the show appeared on screen, life behind the cameras wasn't always as peaceful. One of the biggest examples was Frances Bavier, the actress who played Aunt Bee. To millions of viewers, she represented warmth, kindness, and unconditional love. She became one of the emotional foundations of the series, and even won an Emmy Award for her performance. Behind the scenes, however, things were far more complicated. After spending so many years playing Aunt Bee, Bavier admitted she struggled with being permanently identified with the character. She felt that audiences no longer recognized her as Frances Bavier, but only as Aunt Bee, and that loss of personal identity became difficult to accept. Several cast members later suggested she could be distant while working on set. Andy Griffith himself acknowledged that, for reasons he never fully understood, Bavier simply didn't seem to like him very much. Yet despite those complicated feelings, Bavier's connection to Mayberry never truly disappeared. After retiring from acting, she moved to North Carolina, settling close to Mount Airy, the real town that inspired Mayberry. When she passed away in 1989, her gravestone carried not only her own name, but also the name that had become part of television history: Aunt Bee. It was a fitting reminder that, regardless of her mixed emotions, the character had become inseparable from her legacy. Even the show's famous theme song carried a surprising secret that many loyal viewers never realized. Almost everyone recognizes the cheerful whistled melody that opens each episode, but few know that the tune actually has lyrics. Actor Everett Sloane, who appeared on the series in 1961, believed the melody deserved words and wrote them himself. The song, titled "The Fishin' Hole," was later recorded by Andy Griffith and included on the show's official soundtrack. While the instrumental version remained the one audiences heard each week, the lyrical version became an interesting piece of Mayberry history that many fans only discovered years later. Ironically, the man who helped build Mayberry eventually became the first major person to walk away from it. By 1968, The Andy Griffith Show wasn't fading in popularity. In fact, it was the #1 show on television. Most actors would have happily stayed for several more years, but Griffith feared becoming permanently trapped in the role of the friendly Southern sheriff. He wanted audiences to see him as more than Andy Taylor. So, at the height of the show's success, he made the difficult decision to leave. His next television project, Headmaster, placed him in a completely different role, as the head of a prestigious California prep school. Unfortunately, viewers never embraced the series the way they had embraced Mayberry, and it lasted only 14 episodes before being canceled. CBS quickly tried again with the new Andy Griffith Show, casting Griffith as Andy Sawyer, the temporary mayor of another fictional North Carolina town. But no matter how hard the network tried, it became clear that there was only one Mayberry. And while Andy Griffith's departure marked one of the biggest changes the series ever experienced, he wasn't the only familiar face whose story ended unexpectedly. Long before fans realized it, another character had quietly slipped away. Why Barney Fife suddenly disappeared from Mayberry. One of the biggest reasons fans became so invested in The Andy Griffith Show was the unforgettable chemistry between Andy Taylor and his lovable deputy, Barney Fife. While Andy brought calm and common sense to every situation, Barney usually brought panic, overconfidence, and just enough chaos to keep Mayberry entertaining. Their friendship sat at the heart of the series, and together they created some of television's most memorable comedy. That is exactly why viewers were stunned when Barney suddenly stopped appearing as a regular. For years, many assumed there had been a falling out behind the scenes. Others believed Don Knotts had simply wanted to leave the show. But the real story was far less dramatic, and in many ways, far more unfortunate. By the time the 5th season came to an end in 1965, Don Knotts had become one of the show's biggest stars. His portrayal of Deputy Barney Fife earned him widespread praise and multiple Emmy Awards, making him one of the most celebrated sitcom actors of the era. Barney's nervous personality, oversized confidence, and constant ability to make simple situations far more complicated gave the series a unique rhythm that audiences couldn't get enough of. Although Andy Taylor was the show's central figure, many fans felt Barney was the character who made Mayberry truly unforgettable. Every nervous glance, every exaggerated speech, and every failed attempt to prove himself became part of what viewers loved about the series. It seemed impossible to imagine Mayberry without him. So when Don Knotts left after the 5th season, audiences immediately began searching for answers. The timing only added to the confusion. The Andy Griffith Show wasn't struggling in the ratings. In fact, it remained one of the most successful programs on television. There was no obvious reason for one of its biggest stars to walk away from such an enormous hit. Naturally, rumors began spreading. Some believed there had been disagreements behind the scenes. Others assumed Knotts wanted more money or had grown tired of playing Barney. Over the years, those theories continued to circulate, leaving many fans convinced there had to be some hidden conflict that forced his departure. But according to Knotts himself, none of those stories reflected what actually happened. The truth came down to a misunderstanding that changed the course of his career. From the beginning, Knotts believed The Andy Griffith Show had been planned as a 5-season series. That was the understanding he had while making decisions about his future. As the 5th season drew to a close, he naturally began preparing for life after Mayberry, because he believed the show itself was coming to an end. With that expectation in mind, Knotts started exploring new opportunities outside television. It wasn't because he wanted to abandon the series. It was because, from everything he understood at the time, there wouldn't be a series left to return to. Years later, he explained that he had already begun pursuing other projects before Andy Griffith decided to continue the show. By the time that decision was made, Knotts had already signed a contract with Universal Studios to star in movies. Looking back, he admitted that if he had known the series would continue beyond its 5th season, he would never have left in the first place. That single misunderstanding changed everything. Once Knotts signed his movie contract with Universal, there was no simple way to reverse course. The studio had invested in him as its newest comedy star, and those commitments couldn't simply be set aside because The Andy Griffith Show had unexpectedly received a new lease on life. Instead of returning to Mayberry full-time, Knotts began building a successful film career. The move proved to be a rewarding one professionally. He starred in popular comedy films such as The Ghost and Mr. Chicken and The Reluctant Astronaut, giving audiences a chance to enjoy the same lovable charm that had made Barney Fife such an iconic character. His nervous comedic style translated naturally to the big screen, and he quickly established himself as a successful movie star in his own right. Even so, many fans couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing back in Mayberry. Barney Fife wasn't just another supporting character. He had become one of the emotional engines that kept the show moving. His friendship with Andy created countless unforgettable moments, balancing Andy's steady personality with Barney's endless enthusiasm and hilarious overreactions. Without that familiar dynamic appearing every week, the series inevitably felt different. Fortunately, Knotts never completely disappeared from the world that had made him famous. Although he was no longer part of the main cast, he returned several times for guest appearances during the later seasons. Every time Barney walked back into Mayberry, audiences were reminded why they had fallen in love with the character in the first place. Those appearances became some of the most celebrated moments of the show's later years because they briefly restored the chemistry that had defined its earliest success. Just as importantly, Knotts and Andy Griffith remained close friends long after the cameras stopped rolling. Despite years of rumors suggesting tension between them, there was no lasting feud behind Barney's departure. Their friendship endured for decades, proving that the misunderstanding surrounding the show's future had never damaged the respect they had for one another. Looking back, Knotts never expressed bitterness about the way everything unfolded. Instead, he viewed it as one of those unexpected turns that life sometimes brings. Had he stayed in Mayberry, he might never have enjoyed the successful film career that followed. At the same time, he openly admitted that if he had known Andy Griffith intended to continue the series, he would have gladly remained as Barney Fife. It was one decision, built on one misunderstanding, that forever changed both his career and the future of the Andy Griffith Show. But while Don Knotts' departure happened because of unfortunate timing and crossed expectations, the next exit would unfold very differently. Unlike Barney's story, this one involved a character whose disappearance left almost no explanation at all, fueling questions that fans are still trying to answer decades later. Why Eleanor Donahue no longer felt she belonged in Mayberry. When Eleanor Donahue joined the Andy Griffith Show, it looked as though she was stepping into a role with a bright future. Cast as Ellie Walker, the friendly local druggist, she quickly developed an easy chemistry with Andy Taylor. Their conversations felt natural. Their relationship seemed to be progressing, and many viewers assumed Ellie would become Andy's permanent love interest. At just 23 years old, Eleanor had already built a solid reputation after appearing on Father Knows Best. Landing the role of Ellie seemed like the perfect next chapter in her career. But while everything appeared promising on screen, her life away from the cameras was becoming increasingly difficult. Behind the scenes, Eleanor was carrying far more than the audience ever realized. She was adjusting to life as a young single mother after her divorce, while trying to balance the demands of a successful television career. At the same time, she was dealing with emotional struggles that made each day more challenging than the one before. Unfortunately, things on set only added to those feelings. As the show continued to find its rhythm, one thing became increasingly clear. Don Knotts' performance as Barney Fife was becoming the biggest source of comedy on the series. His timing, expressions, and nervous energy connected with audiences almost instantly, and the writers naturally began leaning more heavily into his character. That decision helped make the Andy Griffith Show the classic it eventually became. But it came at a cost. Over the years, Eleanor revealed that many of the funny moments originally written for Ellie were reassigned to Barney instead. Other cast members confirmed that this happened as the writers focused on what they believed was working best for the show. From a creative standpoint, the decision made sense. From Eleanor's perspective, however, it slowly convinced her that she wasn't contributing in the way she had hoped. Instead of feeling like an important part of the cast, she began questioning whether her character still mattered. The more her role shrank, the more she doubted her own value on the series. What had started as an exciting opportunity gradually became an experience that left her feeling discouraged and isolated. Those emotional struggles eventually began affecting her physically. The stress became so overwhelming that Eleanor started losing a significant amount of weight. Before long, her health deteriorated even further, and she developed pneumonia. The illness became serious enough that she had to be hospitalized, forcing the writers to rewrite scripts once again while she recovered. It was one of the most difficult periods of her life. And during that time, one small act of kindness stood out above everything else. According to Eleanor, only one cast member reached out to see how she was doing: Don Knotts. While she was recovering in the hospital, Knotts called simply to check on her and make sure she was okay. It wasn't a grand gesture or a publicity stunt. It was a genuine act of compassion during a time when she felt incredibly alone. Years later, that phone call still meant everything to her. In Tied Up in Knots, written by Don Knotts' daughter Karen, Eleanor recalled how much his concern had touched her. She said he wanted to make sure she was all right, and remembered him as someone who was simply, absolutely precious. It was a moment she never forgot because, according to her, no one else from the cast had reached out while she was in the hospital. That experience had a lasting impact. By the time she recovered, Eleanor had made up her mind. Rather than continue forcing herself through an environment where she no longer felt fulfilled, she decided her health had to come first. She asked the producers to release her from the 3-year contract she had originally signed, and they agreed without putting up a fight. Just like that, Ellie Walker quietly disappeared from Mayberry. Years later, Andy Griffith acknowledged that the show's writers often struggled to create meaningful stories for female characters. He admitted they never really knew how to write for women, making it difficult to develop characters like Ellie beyond their initial introductions. In many ways, that confession explained what fans had wondered about for decades. Ellie didn't leave because audiences rejected her. She left because the show never truly figured out what to do with her. Although Eleanor appeared on The Andy Griffith Show for only a short time, her story remains one of the most revealing behind-the-scenes accounts in the series' history. It reminds fans that even the happiest television sets could hide very real personal struggles, and that sometimes the smallest gesture of kindness can become the moment someone remembers for the rest of their life. What happened to The Andy Griffith Show cast after Mayberry? One of the reasons The Andy Griffith Show has remained so beloved is because its cast never felt like actors reading from a script. They felt like family. Every trip through Mayberry brought viewers back to familiar faces they had grown to love, each one adding something special to the town's charm. But, as the years passed, the cast members who created those unforgettable characters followed very different paths. Some found even greater success after leaving the show, while others faced heartbreaking health struggles that brought their careers to an early end. At the center of it all was Andy Griffith himself. Across all 8 seasons and 249 episodes, he played the calm, dependable Sheriff Andy Taylor, becoming one of television's most recognizable faces. Ironically, Griffith almost never took the role. He later admitted that when producer Sheldon Leonard first pitched the idea of a sitcom about a small-town sheriff, he simply wasn't interested. The only reason he agreed to move forward was because he respected Leonard and trusted his instincts. Before Mayberry, Griffith had already built an impressive career. He first gained attention on radio with his comedy monologue, What It Was Football, which became a massive hit in the 1950s. His success soon carried him to television, Broadway, and eventually Hollywood, where he earned widespread praise for a face in the crowd. The performance showed a much darker side of his acting ability, making it completely different from the wholesome sheriff audiences would soon come to know. Although Andy Taylor eventually became inseparable from Griffith's name, he later proved he could reinvent himself once again as attorney Ben Matlock in the long-running legal drama Matlock. He continued acting well into his later years before making his final screen appearance in 2009. Andy Griffith passed away in 2012 at the age of 86 after suffering a heart attack, leaving behind a television legacy that continues to influence generations of actors and comedians. Standing beside him for many of the show's greatest moments was Don Knotts, whose unforgettable portrayal of Deputy Barney Fife earned him 5 Emmy Awards. Barney's nervous personality, endless confidence, and complete lack of self-awareness created some of television's funniest moments. And Knotts later described playing the character as the richest experience of his entire career. Long before Mayberry, Knotts had become known for his famous nervous man routine and had even worked alongside Griffith in No Time for Sergeants. After leaving the Andy Griffith Show, he built a successful movie career with family comedies like The Incredible Mr. Limpet, The Reluctant Astronaut, The Shakiest Gun in the West, and The Apple Dumpling Gang. A new generation later embraced him as the lovable Mr. Furley on Three's Company, and he reunited with Andy Griffith several times through Return to Mayberry and recurring appearances on Matlock. Knotts passed away in 2006 after battling lung cancer. For Ron Howard, Mayberry wasn't simply another acting job, it was his childhood. Cast as Andy's curious young son, Opie, at just 6 years old, Howard grew up in front of millions of viewers. Looking back years later, he described those memories as some of the happiest of his life. Unlike many child actors, Howard made an almost seamless transition into adulthood. After starring in American Graffiti and becoming a household name as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, he shifted behind the camera and became one of Hollywood's most respected directors. Over the years, he directed major films including Splash, Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, Frost, Nixon, and Rush, while also co-founding Imagine Entertainment with producer Brian Grazer. His directing career has now lasted even longer than his acting career, making him one of the entertainment industry's most accomplished filmmakers. Another cornerstone of Mayberry was Frances Bavier, whose portrayal of Aunt Bee made her one of the show's most beloved characters. Appearing in 188 episodes, she was second only to Andy Griffith and Ron Howard in total appearances. Her warm but occasionally fussy personality helped give the Taylor household its heart, and her performance earned her an Emmy Award in 1967. Bavier had already enjoyed a long career before arriving in Mayberry. She worked in vaudeville, appeared on Broadway, entertained troops during World War II through the USO, and later became a familiar television actress with appearances in numerous series and films. Sadly, declining health prevented her from returning for Return to Mayberry. She passed away in 1989 at the age of 86. Howard McNear also left a lasting impression as Floyd the Barber. Before joining the series, he spent decades working in radio and appeared in numerous films and television shows. His career, however, changed dramatically during the third season when he suffered a stroke that left the left side of his body paralyzed. After taking 2 years away from the show, McNear returned thanks largely to Andy Griffith's encouragement. To accommodate his condition, many of his scenes were rewritten so he could remain seated in the barber's chair, with towels often covering his weakened hand. Unfortunately, his health continued to worsen, forcing him to retire permanently in 1967. He never acted again and died just 2 years later from complications of pneumonia at the age of 63. Jim Nabors brought another unforgettable character to Mayberry when he introduced audiences to the lovable mechanic Gomer Pyle. Although he appeared in only 23 episodes, Gomer became so popular that he received his own spin-off, Gomer Pyle, USMC, after the 4th season. The new series ran for 5 successful seasons and launched Nabors into an even bigger career. Alongside acting, he became an accomplished singer, released numerous albums, hosted his own variety show, and spent 4 decades performing Back Home Again in Indiana before the Indianapolis 500. Nabors married his longtime partner, Stan Cadwallader, in 2013 and passed away in 2017 at the age of 87. After Nabors moved on to his spin-off, George Lindsay stepped into Mayberry as Goober, Gomer's cousin. With his cheerful personality, hilarious impressions, and easy friendship with Andy, Goober quickly won over audiences. Lindsay continued playing the character on Mayberry RFD, and later brought him to millions of viewers again through Hee Haw. Beyond Mayberry, he also lent his voice to classic Disney films including The Aristocats, Robin Hood, and The Rescuers. He passed away in 2012 at the age of 83 after suffering heart failure following a stroke. Together, these actors created a television classic that has continued to entertain audiences for generations. Though many of them are gone, their performances remain as timeless as ever, ensuring that the streets of Mayberry will always feel like home for millions of fans around the world. What cast from The Andy Griffith Show is your favorite till this very day? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.